And welcome to my YouTube page. I have a really great guest, and we're going to have a really great talk. I'm looking forward to it. And before I bring her on, I just want to talk a few things that you may want to be interested in. It's so interesting to me that in the middle of July, a hot July, it feels like almost like it's October because there's so many people, including myself, doing a lot of things around death and spirits and crossing over and mediumship and grief, and it's just really amazing. So before I bring on my very special guest, I just want to just remind you of a few things that are going on in the next few weeks that you might want to be part of. The first thing is my class, Spectral Reader. This is a mediumship course for tarot readers using tarot. This is not a course telling you how to not use tarot to become a medium, but how to lean into what you already know to become a stronger tarot mediumship reader. More information for you there. We kick off August 1st. So you're not too late. I don't know why my camera is maybe a ghost is saying, no, don't tell them to keep it our secret, but it's too bad. I also have coming up, and Clio is who I'm bringing on. We're both attending together. We've got Mystic South. That is coming up in a short, like week and a half. Hello. There we are. So Mystic South, it's not too late. You could even purchase tickets while you're there. Go to the website. It is an beautifully insane amount of amazing content of all walks of life, all kinds of witchy, esoterica, tarot, mediumship, pagan revelry of all sorts from some really, really big names in our field. So definitely check out Mystic South. It is not too late to come and have fun with us. I will be presenting there tarot mediumship as well. So I hope to see you. But now I'd like to bring on my very special guest. Her name is Clio. Let me bring you to my stage. Hey, Clio.
Hey!
Let me tell you a little bit about her, and I'm going to share with you both her Facebook page, which is probably maybe the most fastest way if you use Facebook. So, is it Ajana? Is
Yep.
that how you pronounce it? Clio Ajana. She is a death midwife, lover of tarot, yay, numerology, astrology. She is a practitioner of Baltic heathenry and Hellenic Alexandrian witchcraft and spiritual tradition. She is a member of House of Our Lady of Celestial Fire, EOCTO. She's also, we are in good company, my friends. She's also a pretty prolific and beautifully written series of columns with The Wild Hunt. She's contributed to the anthologies Shade of Faith, Minority Voices, and Paganism in 2011, and Bringing Race to the Table, Exploring Racism in the Pagan Community in 2015. A frequent presenter at Paganicon, and Mystic South, which we're both coming to. I'm definitely going to hit you up on some of those Mystic South details. This is my first time. And boy, what else? And your day job is wrangling books and people and bringing love and light to her life. She considers everything in her life to be touched and guided by the gods. Cleo, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. Welcome to my little YouTube video, and thanks for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for inviting me. I remember, for those who are like going, wow, how do people meet each other? I met you, and I was, well, actually a couple of ways, but I was so impressed with your book, but also just with your presentation on tarot.
Oh,
And you made it fun,
oh.
which to be honest, I've gone to a lot of tarot things. Tarot was not my first divination tool. It was
Mhm,
my last, well, not last, but probably the fourth one I did.
mhm.
Um, but I will say that you make it so accessible. So for
Aw.
anyone who hasn't, that's fine. And no, she did not ask me to say that. Um, but you want to know about Mystic South, and I looked up the schedule. It's fantastic.
Mhm.
Not only that, but it's probably one of the nicest ones if you've never gone. to a conference of his type. Everyone is welcoming. Remember, it's the South.
It's a Southern charm, y'all.
It's Southern, and it's Southern in the best sense. Um,
Mm.
they do have some pleasant reminders for you when you go. It's an in-person, um, because they were one of the few that said we people want to see each other,
Right.
and it's a part of the country that doesn't often get the love it deserves.
Mm.
So as far as I'm concerned, I'm so glad. I'm glad you're going. You said it's your first time?
It is. I was supposed
Okay.
to go last year, but that was, I had a conflict because, as you know, we lost Rachel Pollack. She was a
Yeah.
friend of mine, and her observance was over the same time. So
Okay.
I had to make this really hard decision, and then I was like, "Hey, let's try this again." So it's my first. How many times have you been going, Cleo?
Let's see. I want to say if this is their fifth year, then it's my fourth time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the first year, and you will hear this, so this is not like telling tales. The first year they loved the hotel so much because Atlanta, being hot Atlanta, not it's
Right.
obvious it's hot. It's in July. You are going to be steaming. They had some trouble with the hotel HVAC system. Something happened in the
Ooh.
middle of a terrible heat wave for Atlanta, but they were so nice and generous, bringing out ice and ice creams and other things
Oh.
and it is a wonderful hotel. Very pleasant, great Southern charm. There's always at least one wedding and or engagement party from some other people. They're not a part of our group. So just Sunday or Saturday, don't be surprised if there's a wedding party. Last year was an Indian engagement party. That's always lots of fun, and a wedding. So people come for their receptions and stuff, and it's just beautiful. Lots of families, very lush garden in the back for people who
Mhm. Ooh,
outside. We're all
beautiful.
very nature people. They'll love
Mm.
it. And
Well,
this
yeah, like, there's a lot
stuff
of
is
druids showing up. They'll like
yes.
that.
The Druids love it. The heathens love it. Everyone loves it because you feel like you're in a paradise and you don't realize literally out the front door is a huge busy street. You don't even hear it by the time you're in the back. Um, if you're a freeze baby like I am, bring your sweaters, but most people love the air conditioning. And I will say they have lots of things for food. There's a whole setup on Facebook, I guess, with the official Mystic South page, links to
Mhm.
it. Mystic Mystic Dash South um, .com or 20 yeah mystic south.com. That's the whole site.
And
Go
and
there.
Cleo, what are you presenting? What are you presenting? Share with us.
I am presenting three things. So speaking of death midwifery, Friday morning at 8 o'clock for those early birds, I'm presenting lessons from being a death midwife. And then I'm in a ritual, Faces of Thunder, an electric ritual. Yes, eclectic electric. Say that 5 times really fast. And that's at 10 o'clock at night, and that's going to be lots of fun. And then I'm presenting a paper on cronehood through a transnational feminist lens, and
Oh,
that's
you're doing that
fun.
one as
I'm
well.
doing that one.
Oh.
Yeah. I go under two names. So I go under my magical name, Clio Ajana, and I also go under my legal name, Carla Lane Johnson, because I'm an academic. That is my day job. So I do everything that I do for academic papers. And this is one of the few conferences that has papers. A lot of people think of, well, you're always at a festival, you're always going, woo woo, everything is fine. They're very nice, serious people who are pagan and who are heathen and who are polytheist and who are witches. And we should be taken more seriously. Hold on, I gotta get, yeah.
Yeah, I
We
didn't
should
realize
take it
that was
more
also
seriously.
you offering that. I was looking at that going, "Oh, that looks really interesting."
I've always had
Um,
interest with cronehood for
mhm.
reasons. Part of it is that menopause is having a moment. Okay.
Tell me about
Oprah got involved. So Oprah gets involved. There's a huge moment, but it's
tell me about it.
seriously, it has been perimenopause and menopause has been something that's been discussed for ages.
Mhm.
And I apologize for moving back and forth. I'm trying to get this done because I've never done an interview just on the phone before, but that's okay.
You look
Uh,
great.
and I figured I actually had worked with a colleague of mine who was doing presentations on transnational feminism. I think anyone who's concerned about what's happening in the world and in general, and that would include most people who are listening to this, would love
Mm.
the idea of transnational feminism, which is basically what I think of as freedom, uh,
Mhm.
so many ways. And so that's what I'm presenting on that, because the stereotypes that are presented about womanhood, aging, and what it means to be a crone. Is there such a thing as the, oh, you're 50, so you're now a crone? Okay, you're 80, so you're now a crone. What is that? There's so many things that go through, and depending on your tradition, you're going to look at it quite differently. So I wanted to bring this to
Ah, that's
the
so
table.
fascinating. That is so fascinating. Can I just add, can I at that one and at maybe the crone ritual, can I just stand by the door and hand out like fans for everyone? Like, here's a fan for if you have
Sure,
a hot flash, like I am in
sure.
my Victoriana fan era right now. I'm telling you, I
I'm
will bring
sorry.
my
You're
fan.
a Oriana fan. What are you? Do you have a fainting couch as well,
Oh,
or
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Usually it's my husband. He's my fainting couch, but he's mobile, so and he's coming. But that's so incredible that you're doing that.
yeah?
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I didn't realize that was you as well.
No,
And
that's
then
fine.
you're
Yeah,
also doing death mythwery. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that,
sure.
the death midwifery that you do. And because um I'm teaching this course for tarot mediumship, but
Okay.
there is a piece that I want to add. And oh, actually, that's going to be on Friday for those of you that are listening,
Oh,
talking about grief and also a spread you can use for the people here, the people that are grieving to help them.
oh,
That's
that.
not just the other side. Um, and some of the intersectionality. So one of the things I do is with my tarot mediumship sessions, I actually, if the person is crossed within 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
I say wait till at least 6 months because I've just noticed that the grief process, it's a noise to signal issue, and it's
Yep.
harder to for the person left behind to perceive them because of the grief. And also, I get the sense that on the other side, that in that time, they're like in a rehabilitation clinic. I don't
Oh,
know what they're doing, but they're busy doing it, and I don't wanna get in the middle of that process. But for you, in your work with, so is death doula and death midwifery, are these interchangeable or are these different? Maybe that's the first question I'd ask you, Cleo.
well, and actually, I want to add on to something you just said.
Oh,
Is it?
sure.
I was just in India for several weeks. Because I do stuff sometimes with Tibetan medicine, and
Mhm.
so we were spending most of our time in Dharamsala in northern India. And in many traditions, there is a certain amount of time that it's customary. The belief is that the body and soul separate, and there's a time. So they have, for Tibetan medicine, they have what's known as the bardo. And during that time, right afterwards, it is they don't do anything except constant prayers and things like that for, I believe it's 49 days.
Oh, wow.
It's a
Mhm.
long period of time. They're not the only ones who have that. So the idea that, oh yeah, oh, your body is gone. Okay, you're gone. I like it. So when you say 6 months, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, even in Tibetan astrology, they have, and people get right away so they can work on it. As soon as there's the official death, they will take the time and date and everything else. So go to the Tibetan astrologer, because in Tibetan medicine, part of that is involving astrology for lots of things, which we don't do in the West, but I think it's wonderful.
That is
They
wonderful.
will get it so that the family can say, okay, perhaps the loved one has some unfinished business. So you get there at the astrology that's needed to say, okay, maybe the loved one is holding on to something, has forgotten something. This could involve going and getting physical things and taking them somewhere else, things that you kind of don't realize and don't think about. Now, for them, that's cultural. So yes, people are like, oh, I want to know how to help my loved one completely. go to where they're needing to go. So let me go get their death astrological chart. And
Mm.
done. I remember asking, and I think she said at most a year, but preferably as soon as the person dies. It should be very quick because you're trying to help them. So if
Wow.
you move things around and stuff, and I thought that was fascinating.
That is really fascinating. So this is
Yeah,
like a death astrology chart. I'm like,
right.
you're making me write notes. I'm like, write notes. Check
Well,
this later.
this
What's that about?
for people who are interested, it is Tibetan astrology. The Mensikon, which is in Dharamsala, it's the Medical and Astrological Institute for a reason because those are both parts. So imagine you have your traditional um, Tibetan medicine doctor who, as a part of what's there, is actually going to go through and do consulting. Okay, what's the right time? Is this an auspicious year, not auspicious year? In terms of your medical and your health issues,
Mm.
in preparing basically what's the remedy for it, they
Mhm.
consider certain things, certain plants. It's a whole bunch of stuff. So for people who are into or have done things with Chinese medicine
Mhm.
or Ayurvedic medicine, similar, overlapping. They are not the same, but they are overlapping in some of the things they consider. And one of the things they consider is um, everything. It's more than just, oh, here's the body. It's what's happening
Mhm.
with your mind, what's happening with your spirit. And that's a good transition into what I do with death midwifery. Um, I had my training from Reverend Angie Buchanan, deathmidwife.org. She does workshops all around the country. It's an intensive 3-day workshop. This is not for people who are just like, oh, I can do this, whatever. Nope. It's
Right.
it will bring up a lot of emotions, and you end up leaving with a kit that is both from products that she is telling you about and has provided, and what you have for your own, because each person, everyone I know as a death midwife, is in a different part of the country. But there are
Mhm.
some places where people are now going back to what we used to have for death. Remember,
Mhm.
around the Civil War was when we started to have embalming for a really practical purpose. You
Mm.
got bodies all over the place. You got to keep the bodies preserved until you
Mhm.
can get them buried. Before that, when people died, they died at home. Your
Yes.
family, your loved ones took care of you. And when they take care of you, then it's like, okay, your family takes care of you. That means they can be by your side. There's none of this, everyone has to be in the hospital. And then someone calls you and says, okay, come and see them. They're about to go. We think they're
Mhm.
about to go. Or
Right.
worse, you get home and somebody calls you and says, oh, your loved one just died. Then you got to trek back to the hospital. I was very blessed and fortunate long before I even thought of this as something to do in having my parents both die in hospice at home.
Mhm.
And I think if you've never had that experience of a loved one dying, we have, it's not what you see on television.
Mhm.
Not even when people think of, oh, someone got shot. Well, that's a traumatic thing. It's not like a video game where all of a sudden people are going to come back to life when they get shot or something else happens. Their emotions and their, real things that happen with your body that if you've given birth, for example, people don't tell you, well, sometimes it gets kind of messy down there. You might poop while you're giving birth. Okay. And women out there who are like, oh God, she said, yes, I said that.
It's a
So,
TMI you need to know. It's a TMI you need to
which is
know.
why, when these things happen, because birth is glamorized, it's beautiful. Maybe you're there and someone's holding your hand or your head or feeding you ice chips and you're screaming because you just want to kill everybody. But it's like, oh, you struggle, you plop out a kid and you're done. No, there could be complications, there could be all sorts of things, but no
Mhm.
one about it because no one talks about it until afterwards, and then you hear
Right.
from your friends or something. In the
Right.
case with dying, it's the same thing. You've got people who, when my father was dying, and it was in hospice, and he made the choice, and I mention this because I was angry with him.
Mhm.
I was angry with him because he'd already had cancer 3 times, Hodgkin's non-lymphoma. The fourth time was pancreatic cancer. And for those of you who have known
Wow.
people with pancreatic cancer,
Yes.
you pretty much are in and out. You get
Yep.
diagnosed, you're gone.
Right.
There's some there's one outlier who's like 30 years with pancreas, like, okay, she's an extreme outlier. Most people are gone in 6 months to a year.
If
Six months.
even that. Yep.
Yeah, if even that, because it's so difficult to diagnose. And when you get it, it's too late. You're stage 4. So now you wonder and go, okay, I was surprised that hospice, which I highly recommend at home if you can do it, get together your family, get together your friends. It's not a, when people are dying, the people around them, when they need help, it doesn't necessarily have to be financial at all. It doesn't have to take all your time either. One of the things when you talk about loneliness now in this country among
Mhm.
lots of people is that you need connection. So if you're
Mhm.
someone who can be there, and don't just say, oh, I'm going to watch the person while you go to the grocery store. Maybe watch the person while you go take a bath, or where you go just put your feet up because it's
Right.
emotionally and heart draining. But you have to,
Mhm.
and you see your family in different ways. For example, the emotions that come up around how do you talk to your loved ones about death, which is
Mhm.
that is not popular. Okay, it's more
Right.
popular, but it hasn't been popular before. How do you talk to children? Do you bring children in? A lot of times we shun children away from seeing their loved one, is
Mm.
when actually it helps for transition for everyone. In death midwifery, we promote things, for example, have the casket gone in.
Mm.
Some people like to have the old fashioned wooden box. Have a thing where everybody decorates the box. That was
So
one of the things I
so
training.
if I can just kind of capstone what you're saying here, like what I'm
Mhm.
hearing is that we did this and then we really went away from it for a really
Yeah,
long time. And now there is this movement to come back to a more home-centered,
yes.
I would say good death, a
Yes,
good death.
actually, the perfect way to say it is good death.
Mhm.
Um, there's a saying basically, how do you have a good death? You know, you work towards a good death by having a good life. And that seems very simple, but it's your actions, your words, and also what matters to you. People
Yeah.
often think until they're actually like, oh, you got 6 months to live. Whoops. Oh, crap. I got to, all this stuff. What did I do? What did not do? What really matters? Your job probably doesn't matter other than whatever money that you need to actually take care of your physical needs. Who's around you matters. Are those wounds that you haven't healed because you haven't spent time, or
Mhm.
you kind of like, oh, I have a grudge against somebody because of what they did 20 years ago. Okay, is that really going to matter when you're on, when you're actually on about to meet death? Probably not. Usually not. It's the things I have seen with people have been, that's when you don't want to talk about the dying, but you also don't want to talk about things that are just don't matter. What matters, you have good memories, you have good times, you have people you want to see, you have lessons you want to pass on. So many lessons. The two things that I've heard, and
So I'm
yeah,
gonna I'm gonna interject just to go back to that original question I
sure.
had because it's still bugging me. Is it the same thing? Is a death doula and a death midwife, are these similar in terms, or are they two different? Do they have two different functions? Because I've heard both.
Right. And I was not trying to avoid your question. This is the here's the short version of it. I use death midwife, one, because it was my training, but more importantly, the word doula, in still in modern Greek, technically means slave. So
Oh,
I
wow.
really do not use it. In fact, I think I wrote a column. I'm sure I wrote a column in the Wild Hunt about why I choose the term death midwife. Now,
Mhm,
part of that is we think of birth as a midwife, someone is ushering in life into this world.
mhm,
And equally, you know, don't just usher in life out of the world, but you also are there for the family. A lot of families and a lot of individuals are not sure about what to do. Now, I'm not going to say anything against someone who wants to use the term death doula.
mm,
Doula itself, as a term for death doula, came from, was surprisingly, someone who was not active in the field. But okay, you think of and but and it's like, okay, do you understand the background? For me, I think etymology of words is very important. So if you
Mhm.
you're like saying, okay, well, yeah, but it's like we think of companions. Okay, if you think of yourself as a companion, a death companion, that's better than saying a death doula. Think of the people who were servant slash slave in Greek times, Roman times. If
Mhm.
you're saying that that person's a doula, you're doing personal services and things like that.
Mhm.
True,
Mhm.
but that is a very negative connotation.
Mm.
So, as someone who is a descendant of enslaved people,
Yeah.
um, you know, my great grandparents, yes, would have been ones among those who were counted as slaves. That's not a term I want to deal with. Now,
Of
that's
course.
me personally. I'm not
Mhm.
going to say if someone else does that, oh my gosh, you shouldn't do that. But I do want to bring that up for people who are
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know
why.
that. That's really
Mhm.
important for us to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really important for
And
us to know.
to also answer your other part of your question, for some people, what they do will overlap, and they're very small, minor things. When I consider for death midwifery is not just the there holding the person's hand, working with them through that end stage, but also being there for the family, being there. Let's just say someone's like, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed. I need to go to the funeral home." The funeral home industry, and I speak as someone who has a funeral home in her family, I understand it's a business. It's one of the weird businesses because it's not, you have to make money, but you also have to be compassionate. You
Mhm.
also have to have some sense with psychology of how do you deal with a very awkward subject. So
Yes.
until recently, and by recently I want to say, 5, 10 years, etc., most people probably didn't realize that now when you go to a funeral home, they have to give you the prices. Any other service, would you automatically go and just say, okay, I got to get this fine, not ask what the price is, just kind of go and do whatever? No. If you go to get a car, if you go shopping for food, anything else, you're going to either shop around or you're going to check out the stuff so you know what you're paying for before
Mhm.
you're in a time of grief. And so, one of the big things that a death midwife can do is be there for those logistical, often financial, or just someone to be there as an outside person where there's no grief involved. We do not know the person who is dying. So we can help you when you're in a state of going, with crazy with your head. We can help you if there are issues regarding um, wishes, maybe having that conversation with the loved one who needs to accept, yeah, I'm going. What are the things I have not addressed? What are the things I have not done? If you're like, okay, it's not a matter of who's getting what. Like, no, it's things of, are you accepting that you're dying? Um, True story. I have a relative who recently became widowed, and the spouse in this case was in denial up until the very end. I'm with treatment. The doctors are going to save me. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And then, of course, left, even had a goal. You have something to live for. Okay. Kids get married, having something to live for. Died and had not done as much as could have been done for
Mm.
basic paperwork. The
Mm.
commercials where they
Mhm.
say, oh, did so and so did something? No. And
I
that's,
just I just had that experience personally.
hmm
Are you familiar, with or those of you that are listening, the Good to Go files? The Good to Go? That came out years ago, and I had a copy of it. If you guys go to, like, goodtogo.com or something, it is complete file, to help you and your loved one prepare for their crossing over, and the level of detail, like, it's like, what music do you wanna hear as you're crossing over?
yep.
I mean, extreme detail, and luckily, I took that with my mother-in-law. She's getting up there in age, and we realized all the things that we had heard that were taken care of were actually indeed not taken care of at all,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh my god," so thank
Yeah.
God I had that,
I'm
but
glad you did too, because that probably made, is she still living?
she's still living, yeah, and it
Okay.
made her think about.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's the biggest difference. I don't care if you call yourself death midwife or death doula. There is a lack in this country. unlike other cultures in talking about death, accepting death, and
Mhm.
therefore accepting what you want to have in life. One
Mhm.
of the exercises I do with my students is forthcoming, actually, is to write
Ooh,
obituary. And
yeah.
it's not to be morose. It is to,
I'd be like,
well, no,
"She was
like,
a bitch." About
well,
myself.
the thing is actually there was, and I forget the name has escaped me now, a CEO who says he writes his obituary every year. And the
Wow.
reason is, well, the reason is because it's a way of keeping track. What do you want it to say? For example, um, the poem about, what's between your what's in your dash, what's between your dash, meaning they have a year of birth, they got a year of death. What do you want to be known for? What accomplishments do you want to have? If you want to have, yeah, I've run 100 5K marathons, great, or whatever marathon it is. Or I lived my life in this way, the things I've gotten to know these people, I've gotten to travel to these countries, whatever it is, put that down. If your
Mm.
dream job is to be I don't know, an astronaut, and you're young enough, like, well, yeah, if you put that on, that's what you want to have
Uh-huh.
on your obituary, it's going to subtly push you in a direction
Right.
of saying, yeah, this is
Yes.
what I need to do. So it's not meant to be morbid. It's not meant to be morose. It's meant to actually make you think about where are you
Yeah.
in your goals.
I also hear in that I wanna add to that, like, also, it helps you kind of come back to what are your values?
Yep.
And are we living within our values? Or is there
Yep.
some course corrections we need to make?
Hmm.
I did wanna add, Marian, I don't know if you can see the comments from your phone. We've got a lot of comments coming in
Oh,
hot,
hold on.
actually,
I'm clicking on
but I
comment.
can show one. So Marian said, that when her and hi, Marian, when her dad passed away, he had arranged his funeral, paid for everything ahead of time, and what a huge difference that made, and how rare that is in the US, or it can be, right? I actually have a question for you, Cleo, around this. Do you
Yep.
think people don't do this work because they're maybe afraid that they're calling it to them if they look at it? Do you think that there's like some kind of unconscious like superstition around that and that could be the reason?
I hadn't thought of that, but I wouldn't be surprised. I should
Mhm.
clarify, I also do prison ministry with sex offenders. So
Wow. Good
it,
Lord, woman, do you sleep?
I do. And I sleep very well because some one thing I will say, my craft name Clio Ajana, the first part is for the muse of history,
Mhm.
and the second part Ajna is for the word for third eye.
Mm.
And so when I picked that, it originally was not going to be my public name. My public was something else, and I made the mistake and spoke it. And my mentor was like, "Okay, that's your public name. You're stuck with it." I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, when you're in the craft, you're like, so for people out there watching and listening, be very careful when you pick your name. If you are in a group or tradition, and I was, you have your private name, you have your public name. If you accidentally speak your private name and it becomes public, then that's it. But also embrace it. If it's anything to do with a deity, the aspects, things for that deity will be things that are drawn into your life. So everything dealing with history, and by extension, the rest of the muses, has been drawn into my life. I think if you are someone who is like, I don't want to deal with death, it is a very special type of work.
Mhm.
And if you talk to people who are hospice workers, who are
Yes.
dealing in the funeral industry, just in general, you, yeah, there's some jokes you can make, but in reality, we are very intense, hardworking, compassionate people. And there are others that may not say, you know what, it's not my thing. But at some point, we are all going to die.
And,
So I think,
and to your point,
yeah,
I put another comment up, Care Bear Bard of the cards, love that, that the hospice team was wonderful, and
yeah.
they can be incredible, incredible, incredible work. Yeah, I agree. Same for my grandmother when she passed. They were
Mhm.
incredible, and she was able to pass at home, which was a blessing for sure.
Oh, that is. I mean, not everyone is able to do that. So I should,
Mhm,
if you're not able to, but I think more people might be able to if they understood with a few tweaks. It's not easy, but it can be done. So,
mhm.
for example, maybe you have in your family, and family doesn't have to be family of origin, your family of friends. If you've got a group, a coven, a grove, a kindred, etc., who are actually with you, and people take turns, because it's not the everything's on one person. And I think that's the biggest problem. Oh, you're the oldest, you're the youngest, you're the only girl, you're the only one who lives closest to mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, everybody.
Mhm.
That's the person who, well, you should be. Well, no,
Mhm.
it's family. So it's whoever is there. And one of the things is, some of the best times I've had in my life, hands down, was taking care of my mother as she was going through her transition.
It's
And
sacred work, sacred work,
it is because
sacred.
we had fun. We'd laugh. I mean, things. I brought her to BaganaCon. So there are those who are like, oh, if you saw me at BaganaCon in 2015, 16, or 17, my mother was at the hotel. She was sometimes going through, if you knew me, you knew her. And she's not pagan, was never pagan. But I figured, you bring your loved one in with you to life if possible. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes they're too ill to come out. But one of the things that makes your end of life so wonderful is when you are able to engage with others. And that
Mhm.
might take a little bit of effort. So you might be in a wheelchair, or you might be something where you're there, you're sitting, you're having a great time just listening. You don't
Right,
have to say anything, because there's a time when you start your transition and you're pulling away,
right.
but you are not alone. And that, I don't know if that makes sense. It's the
Oh, it did. You know, there was a TikTok I stumbled across, recently,
Mhm.
with it could have been a deaf midwife or a hospice nurse, I can't remember, but she was saying, "Stop feeding that your loved ones. I know that you wanna of course,
Yeah.
instinctually, we want to feed,
Hmm.
right? But
Yeah.
there's a point where you're actually making it harder for them to pass. Like, if they start saying no, you've gotta honor that because they're not things are shutting down.
Hmm.
And I just was like, "Wow, I didn't even know that." Like, as something to keep in mind, that the process of moving to the other side is nothing like what it means to be on this side, and, we often have to get educated about it, as to your point,
Yep.
about what to do, what not to do, how to do it, that whole thing. Um,
One of the funny things,
yeah.
I'll share with you what the hospice nurse told me. When my mother came home, and the next day I'm like, okay, she's not getting up, call the hospice nurse. She comes over. It's like, okay, now we consider her to be bed bound. That means,
Mhm.
and she said, here's what you don't do. You don't move her, you don't feed her, you don't go take her to watch TV, nothing. And I was like, huh? And she's like, yeah, we have people who do that, who will, they're so, they don't want the loved one to leave. That's understandable. But they don't understand that when they say don't move, they mean don't move. Don't feed. Don't give them anything to drink. Don't do that. They're doing their own work. And
Right.
instead they're doing their own work. I'm like, they are working. They're just not
Yeah.
on this side.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
like, I mean, I until she had said that, I heard about it. I knew about it with the training. And by the way, I should clarify, the training I took for death midwifery, I took 3 months after my mother passed away. It was not to do as a grieving thing. I
Ooh.
just knew it was down the street from where I lived. I
Mhm.
and that's a clear sign. You need to go there. If you were ever going to do it, down the street where you literally can walk to where it is a clear sign you should do this now.
Mm.
I never
Right.
read it, but I will say, if anybody is planning on going through it or does this work anyway, you'll find that things come up that's sort of like, it's not a question of if, but it's like when, and when is often now,
Right.
if
I
that
to
makes
your
sense.
to your point, when I do tarot mediumship,
Hmm.
you know, there are questions that are indicative of trauma. And the questions are, did they know I meant to be there? Are they angry because I wasn't there? Or I did A and I should have done B. And that feeling of guilt is those of us that are here on this side trying to process the trauma of loss. But in my experience, they're like, no, I wasn't alone. And it really becomes startlingly clear to me that in the same way that hands catch us as we come into this world, this portal, there are hands catching us in the other portal.
Hmm.
It's never alone. Now, who that may be changes. Actually, I had a client of mine, not a mediumship client, but another client, talked about her mother passing. And she said in the days leading up to her crossing over, she kept mentioning the cats that had I'm gonna get the cats that had passed before her coming back and sitting on her bed. That's not just human. It is that whom we love, and they're not alone. So that's always something I just see over and over again. They were not alone. It's okay that you weren't there. They got to see someone they haven't seen in a long time, and
Hmm.
it's beautiful, and it's okay. That comes up often.
I'm just glancing down at the comments.
Oh, can you see him? Oh,
Love.
good.
Because I had to click over because so I clicked with save the comments. I'm like, yes, this is wonderful, and each person. This is such a beautiful. Oh, another new comment.
Yeah, we got a good amount of folks watching,
Yeah,
commenting, and yeah. So, Care Bear also says, "Let me show that." I'm gonna put that up here. That
sure.
she was holding her hand. She didn't want to be left alone for her.
Hmm.
She wanted you still there, and that's beautiful too. There's no
Yeah.
one right way. Some people too have a great fear of the other side,
Mhm.
and that brings me to another point. Like
Yeah.
in my sessions, my tarot mediumship, and the client won't say, like, all I get is like a name and maybe a date of birth and maybe their relationship to each other. That's it. But I can tell if the person was typically an atheist or an agnostic in life, because in the reading, it's like it's so emphatic. It's like, "It's great over here. It's wonderful. I'm having the bestest time." And they go on and on and on about it. And I was like, "Oh, you're worried that they think you were right, maybe." Like that comes up a lot too in session. But as Care Bear says, you know, being of service and those moments, what a tender, hard, and beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing that story,
Yeah.
Care Bear.
And glad that this has been helpful for you too. So
And to have someone like you is so incredible because not only, have you done this, you have such a, oh my God, wealth of experience in cultures and folklore and history that you can really reframe things for people and put them in a context of that's not necessarily how standard issue Americana wants to corporatize, capitalized Americana wants to treat death. And I think that's a really important thing to have, is that general knowledge base. Wouldn't you agree?
I do. I also think what you just said is sadly one of the problems, that it is capitalized,
Mhm.
corporatized. And I every now and then I get articles that come across and I'm going, okay, so this is something else that's happening. That's going on with Medicaid versus Medicare, what's allowed, what's not allowed. I jokingly said years ago to a friend of mine, it seems like the only thing you can do is go find your mountaintop or find your stuff in the woods. Not because I'm thinking people should go and kill themselves, but you should not have death as being a regulated industry beyond the ability to choose how you're going to go. And by that,
Mhm.
do you want to have something where it's like, oh, people think as soon as a person goes, for example, they must be immediately taken out from where they are, um,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that not give family and loved ones the time to start the grieving process.
Yes.
I didn't realize until I went through training and also went through with a couple of people, you don't have to within 2 hours bodies out there. No, you can keep the body there. Now, if you're a hospital,
Bodies out the door. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's kinda silly, isn't it?
well, I mean, if you think about it, um, you funeral homes, of course, run on a schedule. And if you die at night, for example, and someone's coming to pick up the body, it's a company or whatever. They have the people who come who represent a bunch of funeral homes. They're just going around picking up the bodies and stuff. And you think, oh, okay, it's very clinical. I think if people knew how much they didn't have to do when it comes to death, that I think people would be a little more relaxed and able to share things. So people who are racing saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't make it before they passed." Well, they're still here. You
It's
can say, "I'm sorry, I missed you when talking to you, but here's what I want to say to you." It
mhm,
doesn't matter if it's 30 minutes or an hour, whatever, afterwards, they're still hanging around. I mean, for the really practical purposes, like, you know, okay, am I gone? Don't know if I'm gone. Those things happen, but we look upon it as either you're here or you're not.
mhm.
I
Yes.
don't think that that's fair to humans as a whole. It also
Mhm,
wasn't very compassionate to the when you're grieving, and you know, if you need to go and cry over the person's body, or you need to, you know, do what you need to do as part of your own grieving process, you should be allowed to do that without having someone say, "Oh yes, and now you have to have this signed off, and here the body has to go, and here you now have to go for these arrangements." You're not in a state to consider any of that uh,
right.
for a bit. First, you need a really good night's sleep, which if you're the caregiver, best night's sleep ever, if you can release, is the night after someone has passed. It's not always the case, but you think about all the stress and stuff you've been under, and if the person is there, um, and you're like, yeah, you've spent your time with them, you've played the music, you've had enjoying who they are and celebrating
Mm.
who they are, then it's
I
easy for you to grieve and let go.
I have a question, like,
Yeah,
to around this, like, for you, because I don't know. So, you are in Minnesota, right,
yeah,
area?
yeah.
Is dignity of dying legal there? Like, basically assisted euthanasia, is that legal in your state?
No, um,
Mhm.
sadly, no.
Yeah, not
Um,
here either. But,
I mean,
yeah, I just think
uh,
it's so interesting, like, but more and more states are starting to pass that for people that
yeah,
are, like, to ease suffering, and I never understood that, like, why can I give my cat an easier transition with less suffering than I could myself or another human loved one? It just never made sense to me.
yeah. It's and sadly, for those people who are like, "Oh my gosh, I should have that." Look up the states where that is actually, going to be possible. So, for example, there is one place in the country where you can go, Crestone, Colorado. Yay, Colorado. Don't personally live there, but if I had a choice and I could swing it, you have your death with your funeral pyre. I'm all for it.
And you
Uh,
can pick up some mushrooms on the way. Go out go out with a bang. I don't know,
yeah,
Colorado is where it's at.
um, and there are states where yes, you can have um, assistance in dying.
Mhm,
I would love to have it in all 50 states. I think one of the biggest issues would be people considering, well, if you're going to commit suicide, do you really know what you're doing when you're trying to have that? Someone who's been in great pain and does not is not wanting to be here in this world, you know,
mhm,
why if someone who has ALS and decides I don't want to be here, why in the world would you force them because of your values? Each of us has certain sets of values. And I know that's a controversial thing to say. And there are plenty of people who think that you should always, always hang on to the very end, regardless. But I also think if something happens, someone gets hit by a car, unless you're really cruel, you're not going to say, "Oh, you've gotten hit by a car, you're dying. We should do everything possible to make sure you don't die."
mhm,
You know what I'm saying?
mhm,
If it looks
mhm,
like you're going. So I think you should have, just personally, I think there should be an understanding about death and the choices individuals can make about death. We don't
mhm.
have that as an option
Yeah.
throughout all of the country and other countries. Now you have some like was it Switzerland, I think. They just have
Mhm.
the pod thing that they're controversial.
Oh, the pod.
The
Yeah,
pod. Which
the
actually
pod.
it looks like a pod. I'm like going, "Oh my
Unoperated. No, I'm
God."
just kidding.
And and of course the controversy is is it going to work? Like if something happens and then it's like the guy's saying, well, yes, if you change your mind while you're in there, you can do this and you can come out. But then it becomes a question of at what point, if you decide, I want to die, and then, oh, I really don't at the very last minute, can it be reversed? Because it's a
Yeah.
one-way trip. And so if you screw up and get wrong, there might be a problem. Again, I know it's controversial to say that, but I think in talking about death, if you understood, as you said earlier, what your values are, what your goals are, things that matter to you, then you'll know if this is just a I'm feeling down and I need some help to feel less depressed and I want to stay here because I've got a purpose, I've got things to do versus it's time, you know?
I think it's really interesting when I think about in the US, in most states, you cannot get assistance in dying when you're terminal and towards the end, and all we've got is a lot of pain
Yep.
and suffering. But the states can commit the death penalty.
Yes.
So the state can do that, but
Hmm.
we cannot choose that for ourselves. There's something about that just really doesn't sit right with me
For
by
example,
any stretch.
absolutely. I just typed it in assisted dying because I was trying to find the list of states for you. The first thing that comes up is help is available. Speak with someone today. 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's
Oh, yeah.
not a list of places that's on there, but I mentioned that because the in this country, the some people, yes, they may need help, but other people, it may be like, you know what, they really need to have that information and they don't have it. And there are some who would rather, you know, that there not be any assisted assistance in dying because of certain attitudes, religious and otherwise, about you don't get that right. It's not put that way, but that's on there. For the
Right.
people who are watching, who may remember years ago the Terry Schiavo case, and that's decades ago,
Oh,
and that was basically an issue of what the individual wants, as evidenced by her husband, versus what her very religious,
yes, I
religious
remember
parents.
that.
And that case, if you go and look it up, went for years. I mean, to the point that her husband was able to find someone and marry that person because there was no way. And you look and you think, well, why would somebody want their loved one to suffer? The person is brain dead. It took legal cases back and forth. Nobody wants that. So one of the big things when you talk about death and why it's so important to talk about it, and not just for death midwifery but just for people in general, if you're looking at this and saying, well, yeah, I want to live a good life, you have your, like you said, good to go. I love that phrase, good to
I
go.
yeah, it's perfect. I wanna add something I think is
Yeah.
so, poignant to your point, which is if we allow that, assisted suicide, where I could see a slippery slope is,
Hmm.
"Ooh, yeah, they're brain dead. We need their organs." Right?
Yeah.
And then that becomes a capitalistic thing. So this is why I tell everyone, you've gotta check your advanced directives, no matter how old
Yeah.
you are. Every year, take a minute, it's by state, and you sign that bad boy and you put it somewhere because, we never want to keep our family in a guessing game of what our wishes
Hmm.
are.
And have them several places and not always in the freezer, although people will look in the freezer.
The
No, no,
freezer.
no, no, I'm here.
Really?
If you're an emergency worker and think of where it's easy for people to find, okay, envelope and freezer worked, but also several places, maybe with several different people,
Yeah.
just in case. Not in the safe deposit box, people, not in the home safe, because obviously if you
If
can't,
they can't get to it. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think that's really important because we don't wanna get to this other thing where, especially in the US, for-profit medical industry is like, "Well, they're done, we need to harvest." And then you're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," right? So, It's just we are in this weird intersectionality, isn't it? With
Hmm.
some religious beliefs and some capitalism, and then also what our own beliefs are in terms of
Absolutely.
the afterlife and how we can advocate for ourselves and for the people that we love and make sure that they're being heard. And that's what partially I think being a death midwife is, isn't it? Is making sure that that person is being advocated for and their wishes are being met or known in some way. Yeah.
Yeah. I should
Mhm.
add for people who are wanting to know, West Coast, yay, legal. Washington, Oregon, California,
Yeah.
Colorado, New Mexico, illegal for most of the states.
I think
Um,
Vermont is legal on the East Coast.
Montego,
Uh,
Maine, and it looks like that's New Jersey.
New
Under
Jersey is on there? Wow. I'm surprised.
Yeah, that's New Jersey. It's What's interesting is legal under court ruling is Montana. So Montana is still having this thing back and forth. But it always surprises me that some states where it is legal, and it's Hawaii. Yes, Hawaii is also legal. So,
Oh,
uh,
those coastal elites. No, I'm just kidding.
well, hey, I think that it shows that there, like you said, there's a movement.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, there's it's called, Dignity I think it's called digitywithdying.org, I think is the movement trying to push it through the states.
mhm.
But listen, Cleo, we've only got a few minutes. We could do a whole other hour just talking about cultural practices. I mean, this is so I love this topic, but with the time that we have left, is there
Sure.
anything else that you want to share or anything you want to make sure people know about or any final kind of thoughts as a death midwife?
I would love it if this is an interest for anyone listening. Um, Please consider going for training. Please consider going for to actually do it. Understand we are not medical, so that's always the biggest issue. We have issue with the funeral home industry for very obvious reasons, and also the medical industry. We are there for the space in between, the interstitial spaces. We're there to help. So we are not there to go against your doctor or to go against your funeral home, but we are there to help for people who might not have anyone or who might be confused as to the process because we don't talk about it. So those things are really important. I also would like to point out for those people who are in the traditions, this is a shout out and a push for if you are in a tradition and haven't considered it, please consider chaplaincy. We don't have enough of them. Just ministry in general, but chaplaincy, because for those who are in earth based traditions, you may have noticed there are not enough people who are legally ordained. There are not enough chaplains. So think about if you've got to go to a hospital. Think about if you have to go see someone who is in an incarcerated or restricted facility. They have people who will come, but often they may not be of the same religion, or in the case of someone who is pagan or heathen or polytheist, um, they may not even be anywhere close to that. And those biases, in some cases, can continue. So, just like I would urge people to consider death midwifery, if it's a death doula, fine. The idea is understanding death. Good to go. That good to go website is
Good
terrific.
to go.
And part of being that is if you see something where you think you can help, by all means do so, because we are all here for each other. And y'all have been great in the comments, by the way. And please
Yeah.
come to Mystic South.
Ah,
It's
it's
wonderful.
not too late. Yeah, come,
It
come.
is
It's gonna
not
be
too late.
wonderful.
Starts in 10 days. And they have a whole thing for Thursday evening, but it's all day Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think the last thing closing ritual is at 3 o'clock Eastern.
On
So,
Sunday.
on
Mhm.
Sunday. And it's a great time. Not to mention, you'll have a lovely, lovely time meeting new people, having fun. It'll be great to see you. And Jenna, I look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you.
Yeah, same, same.
And
I can't wait to attend all the offerings that you have. Honestly, I'm legitimately very excited.
yeah,
Thank you so much for spending the time today with me. And listen, if those of you who are like, I want to come to Mystic South, but I'm all alone, you can come sit at my table. You can sit at my lunch
Oh
table.
yeah.
It's fine. Like we're friendly. Like don't worry about that. A very very friendly group. The lineup is so cool. There's a lot of ways that you can interact with people and get to know people. So if you're afraid of coming alone, please don't. Please. And at least we'll be here. We'll say, hey,
Hmm.
Jenna and Cleo, what's up? I'm like, yeah, awesome. We're in it.
Just
Um,
approach. Everybody is well. It's one of the friendliest conferences you will ever go to, and don't worry about being alone. Because that's okay. We all were alone at some point. Come up and say hi.
and we've got some just people are like, thank you so much for this talk. And thank you all for coming. And then I will be here on Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard, where we're going to talk about as a tarot medium, how do we hold space for those that have been left behind, the grieving. And also, I have a really innovative and fun tarot spread that you can do for that person too, if you're in service to them.
Ooh,
So, yes.
good.
Oh, so it's all good. Thank you all for joining. And advanced directive, please. Good to go. Google these two things. If this is the next two things for yourself and your loved ones, like that will get you pretty far, just those two. And Cleo, thank you so much for coming. This is
You're
such a
welcome.
treat. I could listen to you all day. Like,
Thank
oh
you so much
my
for being
gosh, I
here.
love it.
I'm so excited. Um, thank you.
Yay. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Bye.